The things said about the king of Israel, for the most part, are not unique to a particular individual. What do I mean? Let me explain to you what I mean. The king of Israel is an office. It's a position assumed by many. So there are things about the king of Israel that are true about anyone who occupies that role, that position. And the analogy I gave in the previous session was this. Imagine President of the United States. See, that's an office. That's a position. And I say the President of the United States is the commander of chief. Well, that's true, but that applies to anyone who assumes that office. So Donald Trump is the commander of chief, right? Barack Obama was the commander of chief. George Bush was the commander of chief. You know why? Because the office of the President of the United States is not an office occupied by one individual. It's an office that is occupied by many individuals throughout history. Same with the king of Israel. The king of Israel is not just one individual. The king of Israel has been many individuals, starting with David and then his descendants. The only qualification that you had to have to be a true king of Israel was to be a son of David. This is before the monarchy was divided into two and there were rival kings. But you get the point, right? The office of king of Israel is not exclusive to one individual. So the things said about the king, his beauty, his majesty, his power, his boldness, his righteousness, these are characteristics that are true of any king, and every king had to have these characteristics and live up to those qualities, or God would depose him, would reject him. Are you with me there? So yes, you can have a psalm talking about Solomon that can be applied to Christ without this implying that Christ is Solomon, because Solomon is not the only king of Israel. And the things said about Solomon as the king of Israel apply to all the kings, and especially to Jesus, who's the ultimate fulfillment of all those qualities. Because all the other kings before him were mere human beings who failed and sinned and were imperfect. But this king, Jesus, was the only perfect human descendant of David, and therefore the only perfect human king. And he's more than human, he was God. So you see why that analogy doesn't work. Yeah, Timothy, it should be, but not to them, right? However, what is said about Jehovah in Psalm 102, 25 to 27, what is said about Jehovah in Psalm 102, 25, 27 cannot be said of a creature. Why? Because those characteristics are true only of God. Only God is unchangeable by nature. Only God is uncreated by nature. Only God created all creation, and only God sustains all creation. These are characteristics and functions that cannot be ascribed to a creature, because a creature is not uncreated. A creature changes. Even when we're glorified, in our glorified state, we will still continue to grow and learn and change, though we'll be immortal. But no creature can be said to be unchangeable by nature. No creature can be said to be uncreated by nature. Then he wouldn't be a creature. No creature can be said to have laid the foundations of the earth and made the heavens by his own hands. Those are things that can only be said of God. Is that clear? Is that clear? So, although something about Solomon can be applied to Jesus without making Jesus Solomon, what they would have in common is that they're both the kings of Israel, but it doesn't make him Solomon. But things said about Jehovah that separate him from creation, that distinguish him from creation, cannot be applied to Jesus if he's a creature. You see the difference? You're comparing apples and pineapples at this point, right? If I say the president of the United States is the commander of chief, and Donald Trump is the commander of chief, that means he's the president. But it was true of Barack Obama. But I cannot say to Donald Trump, at the beginning, O Donald, you laid the foundations of the earth. and the heavens are the work of your hands. They'll wear out like a garment. You will wear them up, roll them up. They will wear out, but you remain the same, and years never end. Can I say that about him? Psalm 45:6, George. Can I say that about him? No. But I can say commander of chief, president of the United States, the ruler of the greatest country in the planet, even though many would disagree. But then I can't go on and say, and oh, Donald, at the beginning you were there. No, you can't say that of a creature. Likewise, if Jesus is a mere creature, you cannot take a psalm glorifying Jehovah for being unchangeable and eternal by nature, for being responsible for creating the heavens and the earth and sustaining them, and apply it to a creature. You can't do that, because these are the qualities that separate God from creation, showing he is not a creature. You get my point? So even if Psalm 45 was about Solomon, this doesn't make Jesus Solomon, but it makes Jesus a king of Israel like Solomon, because the office of king isn't limited to Solomon alone. It's an office occupied by all the heirs of David who inherited the throne of God given to David on earth. Exactly, Abdullah Man, Hebrews 1:10 and 12. Now, with that said, let me now look further into the psalm to show you that that psalm may not be about someone other than the Messiah. Okay, now here's where I need you to pay attention, because now we're going to move on to the next point. Okay, we're going to move on to the next point. It is not at all certain or clear that the psalm is about any specific king of the past. Why? Because number one, brethren, follow with me. Number one, nowhere are we told who that king is. David is not mentioned. Solomon is not mentioned. Hezekiah is not mentioned. We're not told who the king is. Are you with me there? So it is an assumption or a guess that the king may be Solomon or David or someone else, because we're not told. Number two, not everyone and not every scholar believes this psalm is about some human king that points to Jesus. There are many, even rabbis, who believe the psalm is about Messiah and Messiah alone. Are you aware of this? And I'm going to give you citations from rabbis, rabbinic quotes that say that this is about Messiah and not about someone else. You with me there? So even if I were to grant that it's about Solomon, that doesn't make Solomon Jesus. It simply means that Jesus shares a characteristic that Solomon possessed, rulership. But that characteristic is not limited to one individual. But the problem is, I'm assuming it's about Solomon, or I'm assuming it's about David. Here's my challenge to every one of you. Take a moment to read Psalm 45. Show me where the king is identified. Where does it say this is David or Solomon or Hezekiah or Josiah? It doesn't, which is why many scholars believe, even rabbinic Jews, it's not about anyone other than the Messiah. And the reason why many of them think it can't be referring to some human king, it has to be Messiah. The things said about that king cannot be said of an ordinary human creature. Let me repeat it again. The things said about that king cannot be said of an ordinary human creature. Are you ready for me to unpack that? Let's go to Psalm 45:11, King James Version. Now here's why I love the King James, the way it renders it. Guys, this is a perfect translation of the Hebrew. Here, notice how the King James renders it. Perfect translation of the Hebrew. So shall the king greatly desire thy beauty, for he is thy Lord, and worship thou him. Yes, the Hebrew word, hishtichava, shecha, can mean worship. Now let me prove to you that here the queen is told to worship the king and not simply honor him. Hishtichava, from where we get shecha. It can mean to bow in honor and respect. But I'm going to demonstrate to you that this bowing is an act of worship, because the king is more than a human being. He's God in the flesh. Are you ready for the proof? But the King James captured it perfectly. Why should she worship him? Because he is your Lord. He is your Lord, worship him. Psalm 45:11, the word your Lord, thy Lord, is the Hebrew Adonai-ik. Adonai-ik. Literally, it's he is your Adonai. He is your Adonai. This phrase, Adonai-ik, this phrase is used only one other time. Follow with me. This phrase, Adonai-ik, is only used one other time. And it's only used of Jehovah. Did you catch it? This word Adonai is used only one other time, and the other time it's used for Jehovah. Who's not getting my point? Isaiah 51:22. It's all in my article. Isaiah 51:22. Okay. Isaiah 51:22. Post it here. Let me see if I can post it here. Thus saith thy Lord, Jehovah and thy God. Thy Lord, Jehovah and thy God. Guess what the word thy Lord is? Here. And I even give you the interlinear. Thus saith thy Lord, Adonai-ik, Jehovah thy God, Elohei-ik, Elohei-ik. Ik is the singular suffix, second person singular suffix. Thus saith thy Lord, Adonai-ik. Ik is second person singular suffix. Possessive. Second person singular possessive suffix. Adonai-ik. Adonai-ik. Your Adonai, who is thy God. Elohei. Elohei-ik. Okay, now let me get you the interlinear. Hebrew. Do you see it says Adonai-ik? Does everyone see it before I move on? Does everyone confirm it? It's all in my article, but I want you to confirm it for yourself. Okay. Now let me show you what Isaiah 51:22 says. So you take it, don't take my word for it. Okay? Isaiah 51:22. Go here and tell me if it's not the same word, Adonai. Here, do me a favor. Here's Isaiah 51:22. Can you click on it and tell me if you see the word Adonai? Jehovah is your Adonai. Adonai-ik, Yehovah, Elohei-ik. Do you see it? Can you confirm it? Good. Let me repeat why this is important. This phrase, Adonai-ik, guys, this is where you're going to learn meat. You want, right? Okay. The word Adonai-ik, only appears twice. It's only used twice. One for the king and the other for Jehovah. And you know why this is beautiful? Let me tell you why it's beautiful. Unitarian heretics will tell you the word Adonai is never used for the Messiah. And you just busted that lie, because they'll admit to you Psalm 45 is about the Messiah, the king. Are you with me there? And there the king is said to be Adonai. So you just refute that Unitarian lie. The king of Israel, who is Messiah, is called Adonai. Here's the link again to my article. Are you with me there? Before I move on. So the king, who is Messiah, is called your Adonai, Adonai. And yet the Unitarian heretics will tell you Adonai is only used for Jehovah, never of a human. Well, thank you for admitting now that this human king must be Jehovah in the flesh. You just buried yourself and you proved Messiah is the God-man. Now do you see why? the queen is asked to worship him? He is your Adonai, therefore worship him. Are you catching it? Another reason why this psalm may not be referring to any mere human, but it must be referring to the Messiah, who's the God-man. Are you ready now for the second line of evidence? Another reason why this psalm cannot be speaking of a mere human being. I say cannot, but again, scholars say no, it can, but it's not really addressing that human king. It's now describing the one to come that this king points to. Because the things said about a mere human here cannot be said without this being idolatry. You cannot simply call a mere human your Adonai, worthy of your worship, and then say this in Psalm 45:17. Psalm 45:17. Psalm 45:17. God speaking, look what he says about the king. I will make thy name to be remembered in all generations. Therefore shall the people praise thee forever and ever. What king would be caused by God to be praised forever and ever? You see what God said? I'm going to cause the people to praise you forever and ever. What mere human king can be worthy of the everlasting praise of the people of God? And how can he be praised forever if he himself doesn't live forever? You see the problem with saying that this is referring to some mere human that points to Christ? So, how do we then understand the psalm? Now, I'm going to walk you through this. If it is speaking of a mere human king, how do we understand the psalm then? There are two ways of understanding it, but I'm going to show you why I think the second interpretation makes sense. Are you ready? There's two ways of understanding it. Number one, it is talking about some mere human king. But because God has designed the entire Old Testament to be a picture of a greater reality, this king, though merely human, is a shadow of the one who's more than human. Are you with me there? So that's why it goes to say things that cannot be true of a mere human king and can only be true of the one that the king is pointing to. So that's one interpretation. That this king is a mere human being, but he's also a picture of the one who's not merely human, who's more than human, who truly is God, Adonai in the flesh. So it addresses him, but then goes beyond him to the one he points to. Okay? The second interpretation says, no, it's not about any mere human king, it's about the Messiah. Okay. Now, if you say the second interpretation, oh, that's what you meant, Tom? Okay. Tom, you got me confused. I thought you were saying that Psalm 45 is condemning the king of Israel. Well, it's not so much speaking of the human to the spiritual as it is speaking of the Messiah, who's the God-man. In Isaiah 14, if you take it that it's referring to the human king and then the spirit possessing the king, still the spirit is distinct from the king, whereas the king of Israel is God in the flesh, meaning the Messiah, the true king of Israel. So anyway, with that said, let's come back. Let's now see why some people don't believe it's referring to the Messiah. It's referring to a human king that's a picture of the Messiah. Are you ready to unpack this? Are we ready to go a little further? Okay, let's read Psalm 45 verses 1 to 5. Let's unpack it slowly. Psalm 45 verses 1 to 5. Remember what the two interpretations are. I'm starting to lean towards the second interpretation. It's only about the Messiah, not about any human figure. It's not referring to any human figure, but then we have to explain some of its language. So read with me. To the chief musician upon Shoshanim, for the sons of Korah, Maschil. Okay, here's where you're going to really love the church fathers. Are you ready to fall in love with these great men and women of the church that God raised up to preserve the faith? My heart is inditing a good matter. Oh boy, I'm getting chills. I'm going to unpack Psalm 45 in a minute. A song of loves. I speak of the things which I have made touching the king. See, I'm speaking about the king. I'm writing about the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. Thou art fairer than the children of men. You are more beautiful than all the children of men. Grace is poured out into thy lips. Nothing but gracious words come out of your mouth. Therefore hath God blessed thee forever. Gird thy sword upon thy thigh, most mighty. So he's mighty with thy glory and thy majesty. Folks, everything said about the king is elsewhere said about God in the Psalms and the other books of the Old Testament. The language, he's mighty, said about God. Your glory, said about God. Your majesty, said about God, elsewhere in the Psalms and in the Old Testament. And I have this all in my articles that I linked to in the one article I gave you. But notice how amazing this king is. Look at the description. Look at the description, guys. Okay. Verse 4, and in thy majesty ride prosperously because of truth and meekness and righteousness. So notice, he is truth, he is meek, and he's righteous. And thy right hand shall teach thee terrible things, shall show you marvelous, amazing things. Terrible in the sense like mind-blowing things. Thine arrows are sharp in the heart of the king's enemies, whereby the people fall under thee. Okay, so far what you just read is an amazing description of this king of Israel. Amazing. Okay, but now let's read Psalm 45, 6 to 10. Because we already read 11. Psalm 45, 6 to 10. Sorry, being distracted. Now pay attention though. Pay attention. Because I'm going to come back to something. Thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. Wow, he's also called God. This king is said to be God who reigns forever. Thy throne, Elohim. Hebrew is Elohim. You are Elohim, and you reign forever. And the scepter of thy kingdom, your staff is a right scepter. You rule in righteousness. There is no wickedness in you. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Can this be said of any ordinary human? All the kings of Israel struggled with sin and imperfection and wickedness. Therefore God, thy God, also now he has a God over him. He is Elohim, and he has an Elohim over him. Your God has anointed thee. There's that word anointed. And the Hebrew word Mashiach means anointed one. And he's anointed you with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. And in the light of the New Testament means above your brothers and sisters, meaning your human brothers and sisters that you redeem. That's how the New Testament interprets this. But now watch. All thy garments smell of myrrh and aloes and cassia, out of the ivory palaces whereby they have made thee glad. King's daughters were among thy honorable women. Upon thy right hand, now here's where people say, see, it's got to be referring to some historical king. Upon the right hand, pay attention, did stand the queen in gold of Ophir. Oh, there goes the queen again. Sounds like what we were talking about yesterday. If there's a king, there's a queen. Let's not open that can of worms. I'm going to get stoned again. All right. Hearken, O daughter. Now it's talking to the queen, telling the queen, hearken, O daughter, and consider and incline thy ear. Forget also thine own people. Forget your people and thy father's house. Abandon your father's house for the king. Would you rather be with the king or remain with your people and your father's house, or give it all up for the king? Doesn't that sound familiar? Doesn't it sound like what Jesus said? He who loves father and mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves sons and daughters more than me is not more worthy of me. Doesn't it sound like what Jesus said? Give up everything, your house, your children, even your life, to have me, because I'm more precious than all of it. Thank you, Magic Man. Right? Doesn't that sound like Matthew 19, 28 to 30? You see how it immediately applies to Jesus? So is the queen speaking of a specific historical woman? Or is it speaking of all believers who make up the bride of Christ? Marilyn, that's what we're getting into. That's what I'm getting into. And I'm going to unpack it. So everyone see how it can be referring to Jesus and not some historical human king in the past that points to Jesus, the Messiah? Guys, don't you understand? We're going to pick it up from 12 to 16. 12 to 16, and show you why you can make a case that it's about Jesus Messiah, not about any human king before him. Read now. And the daughter of Tyre. Here's where people get confused. The daughter of Tyre. Wait. Tyre is a place by Lebanon, right? The daughter of Tyre. So it's got to be referring to some historical king, right? Historical king that got married to someone from Tyre. Shall be there with a gift. Even the rich among the people shall entreat thy favor. The king's daughter is all glorious within. Her clothing is of wrought gold. She shall be brought unto the king in raiment, okay, of needlework. The virgins, her companions that follow her, shall be brought unto thee. With gladness and rejoicing shall they be brought. They shall enter into the king's palace. Instead of thy fathers shall be thy children, whom thou mayest make princes in all the earth. Okay, see, this is where people say it's referring to a historical human king who got married to some woman from Tyre. Okay, this woman of Tyre, right, became the queen because the king married her. Are you with me there? So that's why people think it's referring to some human king that points to Jesus. But I'm telling you, that's not at all certain, because this can be a poetic way of referring to the Gentiles being brought into relationship with Christ. How do I know? This can be referring to Gentiles being brought into relationship with Jesus Christ. How do I know? You see the phrase daughter of Tyre? Okay. You see that phrase daughter of Tyre? Are you with me here? I got to explain. In the Old Testament, the phrase daughter of a place, daughter of Tyre, doesn't refer to an individual. It refers to the inhabitants of a place. Daughter of Tyre means the inhabitants of Tyre. Like daughter of Babylon means the Babylonians. Here, Isaiah 47:1. Right? Isaiah 47 verse 1. Watch here. Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Is it talking about an actual virgin, or is it talking about the inhabitants of Babylon, calling them the virgin daughter of Babylon? Sit on the ground, there is no throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans, for thou shalt no more be called tender and delicate. You get it? So daughter of Tyre is referring to an individual or to the inhabitants of Tyre being invited to enter into covenant relations with Christ. In other words, the psalmist is saying that the king will save the nations and make them part of his kingdom. Isaiah 37:22. Isaiah 37:22. Watch here. God bless you, family. This is the word which the Lord has spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, hath despised thee and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem hath shaken her head at thee. Now, does anyone actually think this is referring to a specific Jewish woman? Or is the phrase daughter of Zion, daughter of Jerusalem means the inhabitants of Zion, those who live in Jerusalem? No, 47, because you're assuming it's referring to Solomon, and that this is referring to Solomon and when he was assisted by the Gentiles to build the temple. This is written after Solomon. And nowhere are we told it's about Solomon. Yes, it's actually Christ for the World ministry. Okay, so do you see that you can make a case? Daughter of Tyre doesn't mean an individual queen. It means the nations, the Gentiles, like the inhabitants of Tyre, are invited to enter into covenant relationship with the king because he desires to save even the nations, not just Israel. And if so, then there's nothing in the psalm that is about some human king. It's referring to the Messiah and him alone, which is why many scholars, even Jews, believe this psalm is about Messiah and him alone. You can make a case that Psalm 45 is only about the Messiah and has nothing to do with some human king in the past. You see that? But even if you want to believe it's referring to a human king in the past, let me repeat the two interpretations. The two interpretations, okay, of Psalm 45. Either it's referring to a human king in the past that becomes a picture of the one to come, who's greater than him, who's more than human. So there are things said about that human king that can't be true of him, that it can only be true of the one to come, who's more than a man. And so this king is a shadow of the one who's the greater reality. Or the second interpretation, it's speaking of Messiah and Messiah alone. Okay? I lean towards the second interpretation. But either interpretation, you still end up with a psalm that stretches human language and goes beyond what can be said of an ordinary human being. Right? Why? Because the entire Old Testament was inspired by God to be a picture of the one who's more than human, who's God in the flesh, and who is the ultimate fulfillment of all these promises. Right? Let me show you what the rabbi said about this. And I'm going, oh, no, I still got more meat on Psalm 45. Hold on. Here you go. Guys, I want you to go to this link. I don't want you to take my word for it. Here's the Aramaic paraphrase. Here's the Aramaic paraphrase of Psalms. This is the Aramaic done by Jews. Done by Jews. Okay? Are you with me there? There you go. How did the Jews interpret Psalm 45? Click there. See it for yourself. It's in my article, but see it with your own eyes. Click there and go and see Psalm 45. This is how it begins. Here it goes. How did they interpret it? Here you go. Let me give it to you. You ready? Your beauty, O King Messiah, is greater than the sons of men. Bam! In your face, Tovia Singer. Bam! Did you see what the Jews said about Psalm 45? This is the Aramaic paraphrase, is done by Jews. They said it's about King Messiah, Melech, right? Mashiach. Bam! Oh, but you know what? You want to get shocked? Do you want to get really blown away? You remember what Psalm 45:6 said? Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. Look how they interpreted it. Psalm 45:6 says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever, right? Look at how the Jews interpret it. Guys, read Christos. Thy throne of your glory, O Jehovah. In the Aramaic, it's the word Jehovah is forever and forever. Wait. What did you Jews just do? Click on that link and see. You took Psalm 45:6, speaking of the king, where it says, your throne, O God, is forever and ever. And you understood that this is referring to the throne of the glory of Jehovah being forever and forever? Go to the Psalm. It's verse 7 there. Thy throne of your glory, O Lord, Jehovah. And then there's a note. Footnote 30. And this is what it says. What's up, baby? Here you go. God in heaven. Oh, God in heaven. Wait. The Jews who translated Psalm 45 into Aramaic said this is about the King Messiah, and they understood that phrase, your throne, O God, is forever and ever, as a reference to the God of heaven, the God who's in heaven. They took that to mean that this is referring to the God who's in heaven, even though Psalm 45 is about Messiah, the King. This is a commentary by a rabbi, Tehillim. And what does he say? Here it is. By a rabbi. And he says, the song befits the King Messiah. And he quotes the medieval rabbi Radak. Did you catch it? So here is a rabbi who's saying that this was interpreted by a medieval rabbi as King Messiah. Tehillim. This comes from the Midrash on Psalms. It's in that article. In this particular Midrash, guess what they quote? This is why I wanted to find this. They quote Isaiah 52 verse 13, okay? Isaiah 42 verse 1, Psalms chapter 2 verses 7 and 8, and chapter 110 verse 1, and Daniel 7 verses 13 and 14, and they combine all of that together as prophesying the Messiah. Do you want to hear what I just said? This is a rabbinic Jewish exposition. Rabbinic Jewish exposition where they take Psalms 2 verses 7 and 8, chapter 110 verse 1, combine it with Isaiah 52 verse 13, Isaiah 42 verse 1, and Daniel 7 verses 13 and 14, combine them together and say all of those are prophecies of Messiah. Do you want me to read it for you guys? I will declare the decree of the Lord. He said unto me, thou art my son. The children of Israel are declared to be sons in the decree of the law, in the decree of the prophets, and in the decree of the writings, right? In the decree of the law it is written, thus saith the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. In the decree of the prophets it is written, behold, my servant shall prosper, he shall be exalted and lifted up, and shall be very high, right? And it's also written, behold, my servant whom I uphold, mine elect, in whom my soul delighteth. In the decree of the writings it is written, sit thou at my right hand until make thy enemies thy footstool. And it's also written, I saw in the night visions, and behold, there came with the clouds of heaven one like unto a son of man, and he came even to the Ancient of Days, and he was brought near before him, and there was given him dominion and glory and kingdom, that all the peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. Okay, did you catch what it's saying? Now, let me continue. In another comment, the verse is read, I will tell of the decree, the Lord said unto me, thou art my son, ask of me, and I will give the nations for thine inheritance, and the ends of the earth for thy possession. Rabbi Yuddin said, all these godly promises are in the decree of the King of kings, who will fulfill them for the Lord Messiah. This is the Midrash on the Psalms, who will fulfill them for the Lord Messiah. What have we established? What have we established? Psalm 45 may not be referring to any human king after all. Psalm 45 may be referring to the Messiah as being more than man, as being God in the flesh, the two natures of the Messiah. So either way, what's my point? Either way, Psalm 45 does not undermine or refute that Jesus is Jehovah God Almighty in the flesh, because in Hebrews 1, verses 10 to 12, the author, by inspiration of the Holy Spirit, has the Father quoting Psalm 102, 25 to 27, a psalm about Jehovah being uncreated, being eternal, unchangeable, who created and sustains all creation, who's separate from creation, superior to creation, and takes that psalm glorifying Jehovah and applies it to the Son, and has the Father saying, you, Son, are that Jehovah Almighty. You cannot do that if Jesus is a mere creature, because those are qualities that belong to God alone, right?